I recently had a guest on my show. His name was Father Robert Nixon, and he is the author of this book. It is The Visions of Saint Francis of Rome, Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven Revealed. And he talked about this book, and I hope you've watched that. But for those of you that only prefer these shorter shows, I was so, can't even think of the word, shocked, stunned, by the things that St. Francis of Rome had seen, the things that he read, that I thought I had to give you some of them in bite-sized pieces. So basically, St. Francis of Rome was a visionary and a mystic, and her visions have been approved by the church. And for those of you that are not familiar with how the church is, Catholic Church goes out of its way to try not to approve things, to judge everything as best as it can. So for something to be approved by the church, it has to have gone through a rigorous process. And there are those that are, the church has disavowed them, saying they are false. They're the ones that are approved, and they're the ones that are still in limbo, saying, well, we haven't discerned them yet. We're looking. The ones in this book by St. Francis, the private revelations, have been approved, and they were written in Latin. And she was around the year 1600. I could go look again in the book, but I may be incorrect. It might be 1300, but right around there. Father Robert Nixon was the first person to translate them from Latin into English. And I think it was for such a time as this, because so many people think heaven, everybody thinks heaven exists, and everyone thinks they're going there, which is one of the greatest lies of Satan, is to make us think that we're going there, we don't have to work. But the other two places are hell and purgatory. And I've heard from several mystics, things that were written that said, the punishments that you receive in purgatory and hell are commensurate with the sins you committed on earth. And there are specific things that everybody has to endure together: the loss of God, the eternal smells. I can't even think of some of the really bad ones. But then there are those things that are, again, designed just for the sins committed specifically. While on my show, Father read from the book, and he went out of his way to keep it as accurate as he could to the original language, but then also to make sense to us here. So as detailed as he could. I would like to read to you one of the passages that he hadn't read on my podcast. I do think if you want to know, if you want to heard of that Scared Straight, get this book, read it. As you can see, it's very tiny. Here's the palm of my hand. It's very thin. There are only, oh, gracious, how many pages? 122 pages, but it's tiny. And if you need this to read to your child, or read to your spouse, to let someone see, and then they can discern for themselves. But you do all you can. He read on my book, on my podcast, things that happened to people who were, sexual sins were of the homosexual nature. Those who were, as she called it, sodomites. And he read some others. Here, I'd like to read this very short chapter entitled this: The Punishments for Those Guilty of Incest, for those who practiced witchcraft, and for those who died in a state of excommunication from the Catholic Church. This had extra meaning to me since I know that my mother was sexually abused by her father. And I had since recently done a podcast about his release from purgatory. Praise God, he chose the Lord. At least we believe he did. But if you can just take a couple minutes, I'd like to read to you the words of St. Francis of Rome, based on the visions she was given, that are the punishments in hell for those who commit these particular crimes. Next, Francis was led to the locality reserved for the punishment of the souls of those who had been guilty of incest by forming illicit and impious relationships with persons to whom they were closely connected by blood. All of these souls were held together in one huge vat, which was filled with bodily fluids of the most unspeakable filth and foulness. A band of reptilian demons stood all around this disgusting bath, ready to submerge any soul which attempted to escape from it. Whenever this happened, they would seize the head of the would-be fugitive in their clawed and scaly hands and thrust it deep under the abominable fluid, holding it down without mercy. And all the while they would sneer and laugh callously. It should be noted that this place where those guilty of incest were punished was not very far distant from that place assigned to the punishment of sexual perverts. After the incestuous souls had been immersed in the vat of filthy fluids for a considerable period of time, other demons would extract them. Then, laying them supine on the ground, they would affix robes to each of their 4 limbs. Next, 4 of the demons there would pull vigorously on each of the ropes. Excuse me, I said robes, I meant to say ropes. 4 demons would pull vigorously on each of the ropes, applying all their might to move them in different directions. In due course, and after an indescribably excruciating process of stretching, the body would be ripped asunder into 4 parts. But this was by no means the end of the torments for these souls. For the torn quadrants of their body would then be fused back together again, and they would then be returned to the vat of filth. Following this, Frances, the handmaid of the Lord, was taken to a most shadowy and eerie region, somewhere in the middle of hell. She sensed that this tenebrious and foreboding locale was the place where those who had practiced the forbidden and occult arts of witchcraft were punished. But she was surprised to perceive that it was not only the witches and wizards themselves that were present, but even those who had consulted them or employed their services. Fortune tellers, together with their customers, were there too. The demons who served in this region were each furnished with a vessel containing an abundance of small globes or pebbles, resembling iron shot. These particles of metal or stone were held over fires, which are everywhere in hell, until they began to glow red. The demons would then seize handfuls of these heated pellets in their thickly calloused hands and hurl them at the unfortunate souls held there. As may readily be imagined, this procedure caused unimaginable stinging and torment. There was also a kind of large platform raised up in this area, in the center of which was a huge pit of unquenchable fire. Various souls would be seized by the demonic servitors there and bound up firmly with ropes or chains before being thrown headlong into the flames. At this point, Frances was almost overwhelmed with terror, but her companion angel, Raphael, was quick to comfort her once more. He reminded her that the invincible power of God protected her like an invincible shield, and that what she was witnessing would never, ever happen to her, for she was especially beloved by Christ. Indeed, it was timely that her guardian angel offered Frances these words of encouragement at this point, for what she was about to witness next was even more horrific. Namely, the fate of those who had died while in a state of excommunication from the Holy Catholic Church. She perceived that these souls, like all the others condemned to hell, were initially swallowed up by the hideous and monstrous dragon shortly after passing through the grim portals of the netherworld. Yet, unlike all the other souls which were regurgitated after a period of time, the souls of the excommunicated were retained within the body of the dragon. After being swallowed, they entered into his fetid intestines, which were filled with acidic gastric juices and diabolical fecal matter. From there, they descended even lower into the black depths of the dragon's tail. This tail, as has been previously noted, reached down into the nethermost depths of hell. Now, these deepest parts of the inferno were the hottest, the temperature reaching such an extremity that even stones liquefied and boiled, like superheated oil or melting ice. Indeed, the agony caused by this heat, which was 1,000 times more intense than any earthly fire, surpasses all possible comprehension and imagination. But this was not all. For to this physical agony was added the constant derision of a chorus of demons who congregated fiendishly around the tail of the great dragon. They would taunt the souls trapped within the tail, ceaselessly crying out, "O miserable and contemptible wretches! While you lived, you permitted yourself to be utterly blinded by the lusts and ambitions of the deceptive and passing world, and now your sins have bound you up here forever." Now absconded within the tail of this infernal and diabolical dragon, you shall never again behold the light of day. You did not fear to incur the dire penalty of excommunication and prefer to pursue sin than to retain your precious membership of the Church of God. Now you have all eternity to regret that foolish and evil decision. To this, the souls of the excommunicated responded, calling out audibly from within the dragon's tail in tones of the most heart-rending lamentation. And this is what they cried out. "Alas for us who did not cling to Holy Mother Church! Alas for us who chose sin over communion with Christ's most sacred body! Truly there is no one among the children of mortals who can know or understand how intense and overwhelming are our perpetual paroxysms of pain. How appalling and shattering is our shame, and how infinitely and heartbreakingly bitter are the black waves of regret which engulf us." So that's those sins. And to be honest, those didn't even sound bad compared to the ones that I had read earlier. But I do want to let you know, if you don't already know, that hell is very real. That no words can possibly explain what it's like. That all these mystics, all these saints, all these people that have been permitted the visions of heaven, hell, or purgatory have come back changed, have come back saying, "I never, ever, ever want to experience it." There's no words that can tell you how horrifying it really was. Please, please think, read, study, learn, go, pray, and realize. Just beg God for wisdom. Is this real or is this not? Because your eternity depends on it. I don't think there's anything I can say that can change your heart. But I do beg you to get this book. I make no profit. It has just gripped me. And I want no one that I know or love to suffer some of the torments that I've read in here. I haven't gotten to the pages yet. I'll do subsequent videos. But I had heard, before I even heard of St. Francis of Rome or this book, that people, for instance, who committed abortion, and those, I believe, who allowed themselves to abort their children, would constantly be enduring their own body being aborted again and again and again in hell. Their arms and legs and head and body parts would be ripped off and then put back together and ripped off again. And you'd feel all the pains of every vein, every ligament, every muscle being ripped and torn apart, every bone being crushed. Don't let pride make you think I'm just saying this because I want to get you to change your mind. Of course, I want to get you to change your mind. But I want you to know this too. Seek to do what is right here on earth. You're only here for a short 80, 90, 100 years. But you're in eternity for eternity. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching yet another Bacon Bit. And please, no matter what I just read, remember to live your life sunny side up.